So, with the release of Civil War, it is finally time to rank the filmography of Alex Garland. In my opinion, one of the most underrated and talented filmmakers and screenwriters working today. Now, Alex Garland is not just a filmmaker, he is mostly a writer. He has written multiple movies that he did not direct. He has written books. The man is a storyteller through and through. So, although I could rank all of his work, and that video would be like an hour and a half long, I'm only going to rank the films that he directed, which is 4. He is credited for directing 4 films, and I'm also going to add one extra film in there that he sort of shadow directed. I will keep it as a surprise for when it comes up in the video. I wanted an excuse to talk about this movie, and it's a movie that Alex Garland did apparently secretly direct. He just didn't get the credit for it. I also won't be talking about Devs, the TV show that he did produce. I don't know how much involvement he actually had in the full thing. I have not watched the full show, so it wouldn't be right for me to talk about it here. So here we go. Let's not waste any more time. Let's just jump right into it.
Love is the opening door.
Oh, Men. What a strange movie Men is. I remember seeing this movie and actually being super excited for it because I was and am a very big Alex Garland fan, and I thought the trailers for this movie were very intriguing. It sort of promised this weird sort of horror film, something that Alex Garland hadn't totally dipped his toes in. He's obviously done sci-fi, he's done horror elements, but he hasn't done a full-on horror film, and this seemed to have the vibe of something like an Ari Aster-style horror film that really focused on the tone, the world that it was building, the setting, and I was very excited for it. Now, this movie does have its pros. This movie is not a dumpster fire. The best thing about it is the first act of this film. The film essentially follows this woman who's going, and she's sort of like on the run after something tragic happened to her in her life, and she ends up in this town, in this household that she's staying in, and just weird stuff started happening early in the film. There is a sequence of her just sort of living in the house, and then walking around the house in the village, in the area, and just creepy things are happening in the background, in the shots. The way it's all filmed, the cinematography, this section of the movie I thought was brilliant. It's some of the best horror filmmaking I have seen in a while, and it's definitely the best part of the whole film. Because then you get to the second and third act of this movie, and this movie, for me, just on a thematical level, was just way too ambitious to the point that I didn't get any of it. And it's weird. I can't imagine anybody watched the third act of this movie and didn't say to themselves, what the fuck is going on? Completely honest, go watch the third act of this movie if you haven't seen it, and try to rationalize it. It is one of the most bizarre third acts ever. Almost to the point that it works, like, a lot, because it's so out there, it's just so unique. You will never see anything like the third act of this movie, but it's also just, I don't know, man. It's not my thing. I remember walking out of this movie just thinking, I think I hated that, but at the same time, I don't hate this movie. But it's definitely my least favorite of these 5 movies that I'm ranking here. Altogether, Men, just not my favorite thing. Definitely, I think, Alex Garland's weakest film that he's directed. Annihilation. This is another strange film from Alex Garland, one that you either love or you're indifferent about. I'm one of the people that's a little indifferent about this one. There are aspects of this movie that I absolutely adore. There are things that I love. I love the sci-fi elements of it. I actually think the mystery of this film is incredibly intriguing, even if the payoffs of the mystery aren't exactly what I was expecting or what I would have wanted myself. I think Natalie Portman is a star in this film and really helps to elevate it into something more than it could be. Obviously, one of the biggest sells of this movie is its cinematography, its visual style. It's colorful. It's out of this world. It feels very alien in nature. The film is visually different, I think, than anything else in Alex Garland's filmography, which is a great thing. This movie is a little bit of a slow burn. It kind of takes a while to get through its sort of some of the aspects of the movie, which is similar to some of his best movies. One of the movies I'm going to be talking about at the top of the list, which is also sort of a slow build. This movie's similar, but I just don't think it has the same intrigue as that, which is why the movie falls a little bit shorter for me. There's also just a sense of dread in this movie that it never really wears off from, that I just personally, I don't know, that never really worked for me. There's a sense of dread that follows the entire plot from beginning to end, and it just, I don't know, man. There's always been something about this movie that's just been stopping me from going back and rewatching it, but I know a lot of people love Annihilation, but we're going to rank it ahead of Men, not ahead of the other 3 films. So yeah, Dredd, he technically didn't direct this one, but every report ever from this movie, specifically from Carl Urban, said that Alex Garland shadow directed this movie and just didn't get credit for it. I love Dredd, and I want to talk about it, because it's a great movie that does not get talked about enough, and it's a great movie that needs a sequel, and hopefully Alex Garland will write up a sequel that we will now get in the future, hopefully. If you don't know what Dredd is, it's a movie that takes place in this future world, this kind of like cyberpunk-ish futuristic world where pretty much this entire society is ran by these people called judges. These people that decide if you're guilty or not guilty on the spot, and they just handle all law and order in this world. We follow Judge Dredd, who is the main character here. He is this badass, awesome superhero-like figure played by Karl Urban, and he's essentially going after into this large tower, this criminal mafia boss who's played by Lena Headey, who is just a kind of terrifying, badass boss in this film. And what this film is just an action movie. It's got some drama, it's got some twists, it's got some turns, but at the end of the day, it is a early 2000s just kind of sci-fi action thriller that we used to get a lot of in like the early 2010s, you know, the right before the 2010s. I believe this movie came out in 2011 or 2012. It's that style of action movie, the over-the-top gore, the over-the-top gruesome action, the incredible use of like these sci-fi elements like drugs that stop time sort of, or slow down time, that leads to some really cool cinematic shots and scenarios that some of the characters go through. I think a lot of the action in this movie is tightly designed. It's entertaining. This movie reminded me a lot of that first Resident Evil movie that we got that a lot of people hate, but I love. Just sort of this tight thriller that takes place in this tight space, and we're kind of making our way through an area, fighting some bad guys, going through some bad situations, and it's just a great movie that I cannot believe in a world of superhero movies and comic book movies, we have not gotten a sequel or some sort of follow-up to this movie. It just blows me away. I don't think the film was really a success financially, but I feel like if this came out today, it would be a massive, massive hit, especially with Karl Urban, who's now, you know, blown up into being a huge star in Hollywood. And I believe that this is one of the better comic book movies we've gotten in the last 15 years. Deserves a sequel, and although it's not technically Alex Garland's movie, outside of just a screenwriting credit, he did apparently direct it secretly. I'm putting it number 3 on this list. It is an incredible movie, and you should go watch Judge Dredd. No, I was extremely tempted to put this movie number 1, because my current feelings right now, my emotions are telling me this is by far Alex Garland's best movie, but, I am willing to acknowledge the fact that this feeling is probably recency bias. I have only seen this film once. I have seen the film ahead of it like 50 times at this point in my life. So I'm going to be careful here with ranking Civil War. Now, maybe at the end of the year, I'll come back and I'll say, you know what, I actually think Civil War should have been number 1 on that list. Maybe that'll happen. I don't know. For now, it's at number 2. And I will say this, Civil War, in my opinion, is a masterpiece. I think this is a movie that is just unbelievable in how it accomplishes its goals in a sort of structured movie and a concept that feels like in 2024 should be impossible to do without dividing the audience. I think when this movie was announced and we saw that first trailer, I think we were all sort of assuming that this movie in nature was going to be very political. I mean, how does somebody from Hollywood, even if it's somebody like Alex Garland, make a movie about a modern-day American Civil War without making the two sides resemble our modern-day two sides? And if they had done that, if they had made the president of this movie a mirror image of Donald Trump or a mirror image of Joe Biden, guess what would happen? Half of the audience would be saying, I hate this movie. The other half of the audience would say, oh my god, this movie's so true, we love it. Alex Garland's point is that would be wrong. For the audience to attach these figures as one of the political sides and get some sort of brownie point victory out of a filmmaker saying, you know, this certain side might be evil, that's the point of this movie, trying to say that that's wrong, that we gotta stop polarizing politics. Whether you're on this side or you're on this side, whether you support this person or this person, we gotta stop hating each other and following those sides to a point where something like this world, this reality can become possible. We do not want this world to be a possibility. We don't think either side, we're not going to pit either side responsible for creating this world. We just want to make the warning that this world cannot happen. I think that messaging is brilliant, and I think it went completely over the heads of so many different critics and so many different people online, because almost every negative review, granted, there are some reviews that are saying negative things that I will give it to them, you know, that's fine, they just didn't like the movie. A lot of the negative reviews, if we read them on Rotten Tomatoes, are people that just did not get the movie, and they're people that are just angry that he didn't pick a side, that he didn't say, he didn't take a strong stance on politics. And to me, it's like, I think you guys missed. the entire point of this movie. And to me, that point is what makes this movie brilliant. I think it is a bold statement in an election year, and it is a bold statement to take on a movie like this. And because of that, there was a sense of bravery that Alex Garland had in making this movie that I loved, and it made me appreciate the movie even more. Now we can talk about the actual movie itself. I'm sitting here just talking about the themes. The actual movie is kick-ass. It is awesome. It is your basic road trip, post-apocalyptic type story. That same structure you'll see in something like The Last of Us, or like even like The Walking Dead. You got these four journalists who are going across America in this Civil War broken wasteland. They go from point A to point B to point C, and on the way they encounter very mean people, some very nice people, some different scenarios that they have to survive, and you just get to see the horrors of war and what a civil war in America would look like. Through this, we get a ton of different action scenes. We get so many different scenes that are filled with suspense, thrilling scenes. You get some really graphic gore that's not just used as like a poppy way to get the audience to scream and cringe, but it's used in a way to sort of represent how brutal wars can be. But not only that, but represent how sort of desensitized the characters are to these situations. It's used with Kristen Dunst's character, who's been a war journalist pretty much her whole life, and she has seen some shit. And when she sees some of the violence, and even her partner, when he sees some of the violence and some of the things happening, it's just normal for them. And then you have Kaylee Spaney's character, who is sort of new to this whole thing. She wants to be a war journalist, but she hasn't seen shit yet, right? So when she's seeing shit in this movie, it's disturbing to her, it's crazy to her, and she's just kind of the audience, squeamish to all of this violence and not used to what's going on. So it's used in such a brilliant way. Even small things like two sides fighting a battle, and the end of the battle, you know, the losing side getting completely demolished and pretty much just assassinated at the end. It's something that would feel normal in a lot of different war movies, but in this movie, it's just, it doesn't feel right. It feels almost gross and disgusting and uncomfortable, and it's done so perfectly. And the movie just builds and builds and builds, and you obviously get the big sequence from the trailers with Jesse Plemons, who steals the entire show in like his 5 minutes of freaking screen time. He's so good here. And then the third act, which is the Modern Warfare 2 Battle of Washington, D.C., that I cannot believe it has taken this long for Hollywood to recreate, because that is one of the greatest, you know, video game missions ever. And here we go. We got it in a film, and it's as epic as you would think it is. I could take a whole movie of this. It's really cool. There are just some great stuff in this whole sequence. It's a great battle sequence and scene and act and everything. And the build up to fighting at different locations was just great. Me, as somebody who loves America, got very squeamish at some stuff, like seeing the Lincoln Memorial blown up very early. It's in the trailer, not a spoiler. When seeing the Lincoln Memorial get blown up, something about that was like, oh no! Like, don't, that's terrible. But the battle through the White House and everything going on there, awesome. Would I love to see a movie that has the lore of what's going on in this world? Would I love to know why the states revolted against the president? A part of me says yes, but a part of me also acknowledges that if you knew why this was all happening, the movie would have gotten political, and it would not have worked in the way that the movie ultimately works best, which is being a movie that is essentially a warning to us to stop being dicks to each other based on who we voted for. Because although maybe this is not the most realistic, point, this is not the most realistic place we can get, it is a certain possibility, and we cannot get here. I love this movie, if you couldn't tell. I think it's a great movie with great performances. Go check out my full review if you want to hear, like, detailed stuff on, like, the performances and everything. Go check that out. I love Civil War. It might be my favorite movie of his, but for now, there's one movie I'll put right ahead of it. Alex Garland's directorial debut, Ex Machina, is a complete classic for a reason. In the same way Civil War sort of studies the polarization of politics and how we need to avoid hating each other or else face the consequences of war, this movie sort of studies the consequences of delving into certain things, AI, that we probably shouldn't do as humans. Creating something, playing God, and doing things, trying to control things that we can't really control. This is a very simple movie. So simple that it's almost intimidating, because it just shows how much Alex Garland can do with a story with very, very little. This movie is essentially Domhnall Gleeson, who plays this programmer who gets invited out to this billionaire, essentially this Mark Zuckerberg-like tech entrepreneur. He has to go out there and stay at his mansion and be a test subject in this weird program where the CEO of this company, aka Oscar Isaac's character, is testing his new AI bot, and he wants to do this test with the AI bot and Domhnall Gleeson's character and see if the AI is ready to be a product. It's a very simple movie. Something about this movie, though, from the moment it starts, just is so terrifying and suspenseful. And suspense is the main word I would use for this film. This entire thing from start to finish, you are on the edge of your seat. And a lot of the time, You don't even know why. It's just the tone and the feel of the world that Alex Garland is able to build from the start. You are just emotionally sort of on edge from the moment this film starts. And then you start getting into some weird stuff. You get Domhnall Gleeson interacting with Oscar Isaac, and from the start, there is something very off about Oscar Isaac. This is my favorite performance from Isaac. I think he is a star in this film, should have won an Oscar, but he is both terrifying, eccentric, charismatic, hilarious, but just ultimately somebody that from the beginning you just have such a distrust for because he just seems so alien in a way. But that's sort of the point of the movie, and I don't want to spoil it. God forbid anybody hasn't seen this movie. If you haven't, go watch it. But he is just one of the most unique characters I've ever seen written, and you just cannot take your eyes off of him, but you're also absolutely terrified of him. And I feel like I said Mark Zuckerberg kind of represents that type of personality. He's a lot more charming and charismatic than I think Mark Zuckerberg probably is. But I think, Jeff Bezos maybe? I don't know. Domhnall Gleeson's also great in this movie. And then we have the third character played by Alicia Vikander. She plays this AI kind of android that Domhnall Gleeson is interacting with, and they essentially make a connection throughout the film. And that's all I'll really say about it. She's great in the movie. She's beautiful. She's stunning. She is both terrifying as well, but also sort of charming in a way that the audience can actually care for the character, but also distrust them because there is this weird sort of off-putting vibe about it, which is kind of what AI in general is. AI is charming. It's beautiful at first. Oh my god, it's doing my homework for me. It's amazing. But there's also that off-putting vibe of like, maybe it'll, steal the nuclear codes and blow us all up one day. Like, that might happen too, right? This movie is just off-putting from the start, but it is just one of those movies you cannot take your eyes off of. You are hooked into the thriller all the way until its action-packed third act, which just loses its mind and goes absolutely crazy. The ending of this movie is terrifying, but also just so well written and done. This movie is one of those films that you could deem a perfect movie. It is absolutely perfect from start to finish, and as of right now, I'm ranking it number 1 on this list. Now, do I think Civil War will eventually pass it after I see it a few more times? I think it's very possible, because I love Civil War. It's just one of my favorite war movies ever, right off the bat. But Ex Machina is a masterpiece of monumental proportions. It's a perfect example of how Alex Garland understands how to tell a story, understands how to build a tone, and build a world for the audience to live in for 2 hours. And he understands how to do so much with so little, because at the end of the day, this movie is just about 3 people that are hanging out at this one location. It's pretty much the entire movie. Just 3 people at this one location, hanging out. And shit happens. That's it. He could make a movie that's entertaining in that sort of, structure, that sort of concept. He could also make a movie about the entire United States being at war with itself and make that interesting. So he could do a lot with a little and a lot with a lot. He's a fantastic filmmaker. So that's the ranking. Listen, Alex Garland is amazing, and apparently he's done directing movies. I forgot to mention that in the opening, but yeah, Alex Garland is saying he's taking a break or he's retiring from filmmaking. He's just going to be going into screenwriting. He's, screenwriting 28 Years Later, the trilogy ender of the 28 Days series. That's exciting. I think he's co-directing a movie, but he sort of said that he's going to be very loosely, he's going to be away from the whole production. He's just writing and sort of overseeing some stuff in the production. But he says that he no longer wants to direct movies just because the anxiety of working with people is just too much, that he enjoys the writing aspect, not so much the filmmaking aspect. And as somebody who loves writing and hates working with people, I sound like a psychopath. Let me put this in a different perspective. Somebody who likes writing but hates socializing with large groups of people, I'm just not a fan of it. I get it. I understand it. I understand why the filmmaking stuff is probably just not as enjoyable. He probably doesn't get the satisfaction out of it, so I respect it. But there is a sense of loss. This is one of the best filmmakers we have. He is a visionary. He's one of the most creative writers we have working in Hollywood, and it sucks that we're seeing him go so early, right? We're still going to see his writing, but it sucks we're not going to see his filmmaking. That's unfortunate, but if Civil War is the final movie, that's his mic drop, bravo. Bravo. So that's the video, guys. Let me know what you think. Let me know what your rankings are down below. Make sure to like this video and subscribe. Click the video on your screen right now. I will see you guys in the next one.